Fernando Meirelles, you have been one of the central filmmakers in the new flowering period of Brazilian cinema. How has it happened?
Yeah, well, I shot a film called City of God, which was supposed to be seen by Brazilian audience only in Brazil. But we went to Cannes Film Festival, and the film was discovered, I would say. And then it exploded. It was exported for the whole world, and so that was a surprise for me. Something that was not planned, but it happened. So I just surfed in the wave.
So you have discussed Brazilian working class and, for example, favelas in Rio de Janeiro in your films. Have you some special ideas behind that you have wanted, for example, to show the social reality in Brazil?
Yeah, in Brazil we have several slums, of course, a lot, to be honest, and but at that time we shot the film in the end of the 90s. This population from slums were not represented by television or films. They were like they were invisible, you know. We wouldn't. Every time the newspaper would talk about them, would be about crimes and this kind of thing, but we would really not know what happened inside the slums. So I read this book called City of God from a writer that was born and raised inside a favela in Cidade de Deus, in City of God. And I was really amazed by the book because he was showing a Brazil that I didn't know. It was 40-something in that time. And there was a part of the country, a big part of the country that I had no idea that existed and how life was organized. And so I decided to transform the book into a film, and it to tell not the story of the characters, but the story of that place. You know, that's why the name of the film is City of God. It's not the name of a character or anything. My intent was really to show this invisible part of Brazil, especially for Brazilian. So I work with non-professional actors, people from the favelas, and because they would know much more than me how to portray their own lives, and the film was really a revelation for the country. It was a big hit in Brazil. A lot of people have seen it. And then after City of God, there was what they call in Brazil the cycle of favela movie. Lots of other films about the subject because the Brazilians were really interested in get to know more about it. So in some way, the film helped. Take this part of the population out of invisibility.
What kind of country is Brazil for filmmakers nowadays?
Nowadays, I think maybe Brazil is one of the best places for you to become a filmmaker, because in the end of the 90s, there was a law, created a law in Brazil that every company or every private person like myself can invest 4% of their income taxes in a film. So instead of paying my taxes for the government, I can get 4% and buy a part of a film. Because of that, the film industry had money to use. So in 95, Brazil was producing like 8 features a year. It was very difficult to finance films. And last year was 150 films. Besides that, in 2004, there was a law that obliged all the TV channels, the cable TV, to show at least 3 hours and a half of Brazilian content in their prime time. So from one day to the other, the market was needing like 3,000 hours of Brazilian production. And so the market really boomed. We had like 10 or 12 film schools in the 90s. Now there's like 70 or 80. And every boy who has a bit of talent in anything, you come out of the school and you're immediately hired. If you want to make a film in Brazil today, you don't find writers, you don't find photographers, you don't find editors. Everybody's working because the market is really warmed up.
you have also made films of novels like The Constant Gardener and The Blindness. What special challenges there has been in adapting books into a film?
Yeah, I think it's a coincidence that I made so many adaptations from book to film, but I read a lot. So the stories that interest me usually comes from books, because I read lots of books and there's some stories that interest me. But The Constant Gardener wasn't. I mean, I hadn't read the book. I first read the script because I had this British producer, Simon Channing Williams, that invited me to direct the film. So he sent me the script. So I read the script first. I thought the story was very interesting and was dealing with pharmaceutical industry, which is a subject that interests me. And then I read the book. Was the opposite. And then in Blindness, was the next film I shot. That was the opposite. I mean, I read the book. I wanted to buy the rights. The writer Saramago, it's a Portuguese writer, didn't want to sell it. But years later, a Canadian producer bought the rights and invited me to direct. So by the way, it's a book that I wanted to adapt. Anyway, but I adapt books because I read a lot of books and I like the stories.
The Constant Gardener, in this film, there is some scenes in Africa also. Yes, yes. Have you some special relationship to Africa?
No, but before shooting The Constant Gardener, I had no relation with Africa. I had never gone to Africa. But in some way, Africa and South America have the same kind of status. They're like the backyard of the world, right? You have the developed world, and in some way they use Africa and South America to as a backyard, I would say. And so the film was about that. It was about pharmaceutical industry from developed world using Africans as guinea pigs to test drugs. Like they're not human beings, like you can use them and make them sign agreements without knowing what they're signing. And so that was the story, which is based, I mean, it's a book from John Le Carré, but it's based on a real story that John Le Carré read this story that happened in Nigeria and adapted the same plot to Kenya. But that was my first contact in Africa. And now, I mean, after that, 2 years ago, I got involved in another project in Africa, which is a beautiful documentary by a British director called Jared Scott, called The Great Green Wall. In north of Africa, they're planting what they call this green wall, planting trees, 27 kilometers by trees, for it's 8,000 kilometers with 27 kilometers the length. And it goes from the Atlantic to the Indic Ocean, crossing the whole continent. And the idea is to hold the desert, the Sahara and the Sahel that is coming down, is expanding. So there's this forest that is to hold the desert. And at the same time, it will fertilize the soil, making, people who live there being able to stay there and plant and produce their own food. It's a beautiful project that is happening, and we made a documentary on that, supported by NIU. So that's my second work on Africa.
You are now making a film named The Pope. Can you tell something about it?
Yeah, well, I had this film called The Pope that the name changed. Now the name is The Two Popes. It's really the story of a meeting between Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, when he wasn't Pope yet, was Cardinal Bergoglio. And these two popes, they're very different. They're almost, they have really contrary opinions on everything. Benedict is very traditionalist, and Francis is progressist. And they don't like each other at first, and they don't understand each other. So the film explores this difference of thoughts that the church has, and Benedict is played by Anthony Hopkins, and Pope Francis is brilliantly played by Jonathan Pryce. The film is ready. We're just submitted to Venice. I hope we get a slot. And the idea is to promote the film in festivals from August till end of November, and the film will be released theatrical. We will have theatrical release in beginning of December, and will be in the platform in Netflix on the 22nd December. I'm very happy with the film. I mean, it's drama. It's a very smart script and very funny as well. You know, because Pope Francis is quite funny, or at least we explored his good sense of humor. So it's a very has a lightness. You know, it's a very intellectual chat, but with lightness. That's what I like about the film.
It sounds very exciting. The last question: how are your feelings about Midsummer Night Film Festival?
Well, my feeling about the Midnight Sun Festival couldn't be better. Let me start again. So, yeah, my feeling about the Midnight Sun Film Festival couldn't be better. This is the perfect ambience for you to watch films. Usually when you go to festival, you don't have time to watch films. It's a lot of press and buzz and presentations and here I'm being able to watch. I mean, this is my third day. I've watched already 6 films. Today I have 3 films to go. So in 5 days I'll be able to watch like 15 films in a really quiet situation, and great things that you watch films and then you meet the director, you have lunch with the director. Yesterday I had sauna with the director. So, I mean, it couldn't be better. I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you for